Welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to helping the investment banking community grow through learning from other successful leaders. So whether you're interested in learning about investment banking, or you're an analyst or associate looking for advice on career progression and succeeding in the industry, or if you're a VP or senior that's passionate about leadership, you'll take something away from this week's episode. My name is Pete Nieberg, Global Head at Outram, and my mission is to connect as many of you with successful investment banking leaders as possible. So thanks for joining me and enjoy the episode. I'm super excited to introduce today's guest, Noha El Ghazaly. Noha started her career with HC Securities in Egypt, where she focused on all aspects of the investment banking industry and built a really good knowledge base. And in just over 10 and a half years, she grew from the analyst position all the way to an executive director. Noha then took a managing director and head of investment banking position at Pharos Holding in Cairo, who under her leadership run one of the most active investment banks in the region, closing many successful transactions and as well as high profile ones. And 2 years ago, Noha moved into the private equity space as a managing director for Mediterrania Capital Partners and is responsible for some of their ambitious growth targets. If that wasn't enough, Noha also sits on numerous boards in the region as well. She was recently recognized by the top 100 career women in Africa for advancing excellence and professionalism in Africa's corporate sector, paving the way for the next generation of female leaders. A terrific accolade and testament to her hard work, dedication, and commitment. Getting to know Noha, I understand she meets with interns, juniors to help them develop their careers and is really passionate about supporting aspiring leaders in the industry to grow. So we are very lucky to have her on the call and the podcast today. So I'm psyched for our conversation, Noha. Welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast. And thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for having me. It's a really nice idea, and I'm very happy to be here.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So why don't we just start with you introducing the audience to Mediterrania Capital Partners and what you do for your clients?
Sure. So Mediterrania Capital Partners, we are an African private equity firm that invests in North and Francophone West Africa. We are now investing out of our fourth fund. We have been operating on the continent since 2008. And we have invested in numerous sectors with a lot of family businesses that we like to back. So this is our DNA. We like to back family businesses on the continent to grow and take them to the next level. I'm managing director for Egypt. So I am responsible for all the investments that are going to be out of the fourth fund in the Egyptian market. And basically what we do as private equity, we like to focus a lot on value creation. So we like to go into a company and understand exactly how can we take it from X to 2X or 3X, given our contributions on the governance side, our contributions on the strategy side. So, for example, let me give you one example of an investment that we made in Egypt. We invested in, it was more like an SME company in the healthcare space, and we backed them, and it was a single brand, mostly operating in Cairo. They had around 14 branches in the Egyptian market, and we backed them to do another acquisition that they would have not been able to do through just their internally generated cash flows. And now they are operating 5 brands, 3 countries. They are by far the largest region of diagnostic imaging in the region. So it's that kind of stories that we like to build. We have done exactly the same in a lot of other companies in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Ivory Coast. So this is basically what we do.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction. And I'm sure the audience were keen to know that. And I love the family aspect, and congrats on the healthcare success. It really seems like that company's benefited from your support and you've added a lot of value. So great to see.
Thank you.
I'm always interested to speak to successful leaders who have been in the industry 15 years or so, or 15 years plus, about how did you end up in investment banking?
Honestly, it was one course in university that got me to think that investment banking is where I want to go. I studied economics as an undergrad, and there was one course called Money and Banking where it was talking mostly about finance and transactions and M&As and stuff like that. And once I saw that, I was like, this is where I need to end up. I love this. And right after college, or right after graduating, I joined HC, maybe within a couple of months from graduation. And ever since, it's been my passion, basically. I found myself just the moment I walked into that door, attended the first meeting with the team, and I was like, this is where I belong.
That's amazing to be able to find your calling and feel so passionate about it, and from study.
I was very lucky, I have to say.
That's a great journey. And just thinking about what makes you so passionate about investment banking, what is it?
I think it has a lot of things because it's a very multidimensional job. You get to do so many things, you get to learn so many things, you get to meet a lot of people. It has aspects that are related to emotional intelligence, that are related to project management, that are related. You have a lot of work that you put in, and you eventually succeed in doing something. You can see tangible results. As I'm telling you now, in that healthcare story, you can see how it has contributed to delivering services on the market. I've worked a lot with clients on very long-term transactions that I've seen where they have been and where they have come. So it's a job that's very rewarding, and at the same time, it's very dynamic and it's not boring. So if you work in the morning on a hospital and at night you're working on a building materials manufacturer, you're crunching numbers one day, you're having meetings and having like all the emotional intelligence aspect the others. So I think it's the best job in the world.
Your passion really shines through. So thanks for sharing. And you spoke about things I've heard from other leaders, the variety, the dynamic nature of the work, the people aspect. So it really resonates with me as well. Before we get into the real crux of today's discussion, tell the listeners one thing they can't find about you anywhere online. I know it's tough these days with online, something unknown or unexpected.
I don't share a lot online, so I think a lot of things you wouldn't find. But one thing that's really shocking is that I'm a certified hypnotist.
Wow. Okay. Up in the stakes in terms of unknown facts on the podcast. Okay, cool.
Yes, so I've done a lot of things that are related to like neuro-linguistic programming and stuff like that, and I've taken a lot of courses, and one of them was hypnosis.
Wow. Okay. I'll be careful on the podcast that you don't put me under a spell.
Don't worry. I'm benign.
Excellent. That's a great fact. Thanks so much for sharing. Okay, so investment banking, private equity, it's about successful deals. That's obviously what makes the industry go around. So I'd always like to start each episode with a bit about that. So having closed so many successful deals in your career, what are the keys to having success?
I think the keys to having success in investment banking, there are a lot and they're very case specific, but maybe if I can think of like one thing, it would be being able to put yourself in the position of the counterparty and understand where they come from to come up with win-win situations. Because at the end of the day, no transaction is going to happen unless it's a win-win situation for both parties. So, and this has to be a part of your DNA. You're not trying to take an advantage of a situation or a person or their knowledge or their lack of knowledge, but you're trying to come up with something that's sustainably good for the both of you. So I think that is something that's very important when it comes to doing transactions at large. One other thing which I've always told my team is that this is one of the most creative jobs in the world. Although it seems like you're crunching numbers, you're reading stuff, but at the end of the day, it's about problem solving. So if the solutions were very obvious, probably investment banks would not exist in the first place. So it's all about creativity and problem solving. And it's something that's also very, very important. One thing that I made a lot of use of as well was that I was never very attached to results. I always just enjoyed the journey of doing things. Because if you get attached to results, you start identifying with them so much, your motives start to change. So you have to make it your hobby, basically. It's something that you're enjoying the process of. It's not something that you are just results oriented. Of course, results are extremely important. However, getting attached to them, sometimes it takes away from your motivations when you're doing the whatever process that you're going through. So I think it's taking a bird's eye view. It's enjoying it. It's understanding that you're not there to just win it. You're there to create a difference. And I would say these are the main things that I think have worked for me during my journey.
Perfect. Thanks for that. So, putting yourself in the stakeholders' mindset, understanding what they're looking for, searching for that win-win, problem solving, and being creative, and not getting too attached to the results, but obviously being mindful of them. So, for those newer to the industry, to build skills in those three areas, any advice for them?
For someone who's cracking into the industry, I would say patience is very important because it's a job that requires a lot of patience. And understanding the value of in-depth knowledge is also something that's very important. Seeing something once, it's not enough to think that you've got the process figured out, because it's a very case by case specific job. So you have to understand that every single case, you have to dig very deep into it, because that in-depth digging is what gives you the ability to come up with solutions that make things work. So the in-depth knowledge is something very important. Patience is something very important because it's a journey, it's a learning curve, and it's a very steep learning curve. So you need to understand that there's always more. There's always more. I have been working for I don't know how many years now. I wouldn't say because I'm trying to hide my gray hair, but it's still a learning curve for me. It's a very steep learning curve for me still. So understanding that is something that's very important, especially with the newer generations. I would say they are always very fast paced. They always want results very fast. They always seeking that recognition extremely fast. So I would say being grounded and the value of in-depth knowledge goes a very long way.
Perfect. Thanks. I think that's great advice for the listeners, and I've heard a steep learning curve many times from leaders on the podcast as well. So thanks for sharing that. It seems to be a common theme.
Yes, it is, of course, because you're learning something new every day, literally every day.
Yeah, for sure. And thinking about the analysts and the associates, obviously they're not owning the client relationship on deals when they're first into the business. So what advice would you give them on how to support deals really well to ensure they come to a great outcome?
So it's different between analysts and associates, because for an analyst, your number one job is to learn fast. Just learn fast. Just put in the effort, put in the thinking behind the things that you're seeing, contribute to, because you are the first entry to data points. So that filtration process that you're doing goes into every single decision that's being taken across the process. So just make sure that you are giving it the time and the effort that it's needed, and learn as much as possible. For an associate, I would say this was the hardest part of the journey, because you're crunched in the middle. You're dealing with analysts and you have like so many unrealistic expectations from your managers or the clients or whatever, and you are just in the middle. So for associates, I would say time management is key, because you're working on multiple projects at the same time. You're probably working with multiple people at the same time. So time management is key, and clear communication is extremely important, because if I'm working with an associate, I would probably want to trust 100% of the information that they're giving me. So I need to make sure that the information that they're giving me is extremely clear. So if we haven't found answers to certain things, or if we are lacking information in some way, or if we have an issue in a process, like dealing with a person who's a part of the stakeholders of the transaction, it's something that's very important to clearly communicate things, because there are always solutions that at the associate level you don't know how to maneuver around them. However, if you communicate clearly to the rest of the team, we will be able to come up with these solutions together.
Perfect. So for the analyst, really your advice, learn fast, contribute, be accurate, make sure what you're producing is accurate and effective. And on the associate, really time management and being clear on that communication is key. I've heard from other leaders that transition from analyst to associate is the hardest in the industry. And you've talked about obviously an associate role being very hard.
Yes.
And I think adding on management to the day-to-day is tough. Any advice you've got for those associates listening or analysts about to become associates on how to make that transition easier?
Brace yourself. It's going to be a tough ride. But the good thing is that once you get out of that tunnel, it gets much easier. It gets much easier, and it's not that it gets easier. It gets more difficult. However, you've built a stamina that you cannot build in any other role across the journey. So it's a phase of building stamina, and you have to go through it, understanding that it's the steepest part of the learning curve across the whole journey, and just understanding that and taking in as much as possible, listening a lot, contributing your ideas and voicing your ideas is something that I think is very important in that role, because again, you are the one who's closest to the information. So you are the one who needs to come up with a lot of ideas. Maybe some of them will work, maybe some of them will not, but don't get discouraged from speaking, because this is something that's very important.
Yeah, that's come up a lot from other leaders as well. Confidence, having that confidence to speak up and not worry that you're just there on the work, but actually to contribute more. So I love that. Thanks so much for sharing.
I'm very happy that we are the same across the globe.
Yeah. What about on the VP side? VPs are obviously the nearest to executive directors or managing director roles. Any advice for them to step up and be successful leaders?
I think for the VP role, your key focus should be supporting your team, because you have gone into a role that is more on the coaching and the mentorship level, and you are first degree of interaction with associates and analysts. So supporting the team, teaching them, coaching them, understanding that their technical knowledge is not as advanced as yours. So giving them from your time to go through things in details and to guide them to the tiniest detail of the process or review or whatever, giving them constructive feedback, not just expecting a certain quality of work because you've been for a number of years as an associate and you've already gone through that steep learning curve. Sometimes people go into the VP role with the expectation that it should have been done this way. So I think guidance and coaching to the rest of the team is something that's very important. Client interaction as well increases significantly for that role. So being very mindful of different stakeholders, making sure that you have the emotional intelligence to deal with each according to what they need, because we also deal in transactions that usually most of the companies, this is kind of like a side thing for them. It's not their core business. They don't understand it. They're not very well educated in it. It's an extremely frustrating process. Like, for example, a due diligence is an extremely frustrating process to a management team. So, and a VP is sometimes the person who is supposed to be handling this on the client side. So understanding that not because for us doing the transaction is the most important thing, by definition, it means that for them doing the transaction is the most important thing. And a VP's role is very important to bridge that gap, to make sure that the process goes on seamlessly.
Thanks for sharing that. And the coaching comes through loud and clear. Before we jump into mentorship, that's always a topic I like to get into on the podcast. But before we go there, you've mentioned a few things a few times. So emotional intelligence come up a lot. Time management came up. Coaching. Are there things that you've done to grow these areas to make you more ready for leadership or to help you be an aspiring leader? Emotional intelligence, coaching, time management. What type of things have you done in those areas?
I've done a lot of mistakes. You learn from your mistakes. I've done a lot of mistakes. I've had times where I thought that I can manage so many things at the same time, and then I was not able to deliver on time. I've been fixated on certain deliverables that they have to come up with a certain way, while I should have managed it maybe in a phased approach so that I can give the most important thing first and then I can follow with the least important things. I've watched a lot of people. It's a people's job at the end of the day. So if you are a sponge, if you kind of like absorb from people, you learn a lot by absorbing as well. So I've seen a lot of people in meetings, how they conduct themselves, seeing different people you learn how to deal with them. So you go in, you try to deal with them in a certain way, and then you realize, no, this is not the right way of dealing with that person. Maybe you need to be more relaxed. Maybe they get too anxious and you need to calm them down, or someone else who's too relaxed and maybe you need to be like more pushy with them. So it's a trial and error process, and it comes with experience and mistakes.
So a lot of experience rather than courses or outside learning. It's really from feel and from experience of being in those situations that's really helped.
Yes, and this is one of these jobs where studying has very little to do with the day-to-day job. So it's an experience. That's why I'm telling you, for a lot of people entering into this business, they have to understand that it's all about patience, because literally like 90% of the job has nothing to do with anything that you've studied.
Yeah, an apprenticeship, I've heard it called before
Yes.
many times. And as you say, each step's another steep learning curve. So makes
Exactly.
sense. What about, we know that the investment banking industry is ever changing. And at the moment, we're in a cycle from when we've gone from a really high activity level in M&A to obviously a lot lower, and troubles in the equity markets as well. For those juniors coming into the industry, what advice would you give them to be successful despite the ever-changing environment of investment banking?
Look for the right opportunities given every phase or every time or every turbulent. So turbulent times, they have a lot of issues, but they also bring up a lot of opportunities. So being able to see the opportunity within these turbulent times is something that's very important. Just to give you a bit of a glimpse, I started working in 2007. 2008 was the financial crisis. 2011 was the Arab Spring. 2013 was a revolution in Egypt. 2016 was a devaluation. 2020 was the COVID. 2022 is like the year that we're in now. So it's been a very turbulent. If you look at it, it's like all turbulent times. However, during the course of this, I've been able to close over 25 transactions, over $1.5 billion. So there are opportunities. There are always opportunities, irrespective of the times that you're going through. So being very flexible and very agile to identify these opportunities and go after them is something that's very important.
I love that. And I've heard creativity about going after opportunities as well. And you mentioned creativity at the start as one of the things you loved about the industry. Do you agree with that? And
Of course.
is it picking the right area to go after deals, or picking opportunities?
It's picking the right industry, it's picking the right sponsor, it's picking the right business model, it's picking the right champion that you can actually create a lot of value. So, for example, at turbulent times, there are a lot of consolidations in many emerging markets that can happen. So, who are you going after in that industry? So, if that industry has to consolidate, who are you going after? Because that champion, that management team, is the one that has to have the ability to integrate businesses, to absorb different cultures, to re-strategize things, to think in a different way. So it's about so many things. It's not just it's again creativity. It's not just a straightforward answer. It's about seeing a picture and then identifying that this is the right one to go after.
Thanks for sharing a bit more information there. Before we move on to that mentorship area that we touched on before, I want to talk a little bit about the change or the transition from investment banking to PE. Obviously, that's a transition that listeners will have gone through, and maybe some listeners are thinking about going through. So what should bankers looking at that change know?
I think bankers looking at that change should know that they are not the same. Because in investment banking, you might be under the impression that it's the same, or in private equity, you might be under the impression that it's the same. They are not the same. They might have the same language, they might have the same tools, but they are not the same mindset and they are not the same path. Of course, specific investment banking experience can make you a bit closer or further away from private equity. So, for example, I've worked a lot on the buy side. So that gives you a bit of a closer look to private equity. I worked with private equity funds as clients. So I've seen their internal processes and how they think. I've worked with companies on very long-term strategies. So, for example, I worked with a company called Middle East Glass in Egypt for maybe 10 years. We worked on 2 acquisitions, consolidation of the market. We worked on private placement to a private equity. We worked on entering into a parallel business and exiting from it at excellent returns, like maybe 8 years later. And now I sit with them on the board. So I've seen like the full cycle of value creation and stuff with them. So of course, and I've done that with several other clients as well. So some of your investment banking experience can make it more relevant to private equity, but you have to know that at the core they are not the same. They're completely different ball games.
And what are those differences? Can you help the audiences, again, interested in that change, understand a bit of what the differences are?
Sure. So, for example, in investment banking, you focus on the transaction, getting the transaction done. In private equity, the transaction is just opening the door. The whole process starts after the transaction. So, portfolio management starts after the transaction, value creation starts after the transaction, exiting starts after the transaction. And technically, you make money from all of these things. You don't make money when you enter. You make money when you create value. You make money when you choose the proper portfolio and you have the proper contribution to it along the way. And you make money when you exit. So investment banking is kind of like the doorway, but it's not like even 90% of the way. So, and that's something that's very important to understand as a distinction between both. I'm not doing the transaction because I just want to close the deal. Most of the times, I would rather not close the deal if I don't have a very clear visibility and path on what I'm going to do and how I'm going to exit.
Thanks for sharing. I think that gives us a much better idea. And I guess to prepare for those differences, any recommendations? You talked a bit about mindset, but is there more recommendations you have?
I would say maybe, as I was telling you, one of the things is that for example, when you're selling a company, putting yourself in the shoes of the buyer is something that's very important. Understanding where they come from is something that's very important, especially if it's a financial investor. Talk to them about what their plans are, what their concerns are, because if they talk to you about concerns related to exit, for example, it will make you think about, yes, for the next time I'm preparing a transaction and I'm selling something, I need to be thinking that it has to be a good exit for the buyer or whatever. So I would say putting yourself in different positions for the stakeholders. I wouldn't say studying, because it's not about studying. It's about on the job experience. Like, get in depth toward things. When you're selling a company, understand the details of why it's growing. It's not just that it's growing at 20-30%. Understand why it's growing, the fundamentals of its growth. Is it growing in a sustainable way or not? That in-depth know-how is something that's very important across the board, whether it's private equity or investment bank.
For sure. Great focus, I think, for those listeners interested more in getting into the PE space, what it entails and the depth of knowledge that you need to have, as well alongside the mindset and knowing what you're getting into by the sounds of it. So thanks for sharing that.
Exactly.
As I mentioned, let's move a bit to mentorship. Great topic. I hear very different ideas about mentorship from leaders as well as other investment banking roles I speak to. Talk to me a bit about how important mentorship is in the industry from your perspective.
It's extremely important because, as I'm telling you, nothing prepares you for this job before getting into it. So neither anything that you study nor anything that you do or any certificates that you take prepares you fully for that job. So it's a job where if you want your team to develop, you have to mentor them and coach them and take them from one step to the next with very detailed guidance. Otherwise, we will not develop the talent. So even if it's on a very selfish note, you are developing your team for yourself at the end of the day. Of course, this is the most selfish part of it. You can look into it and in many different aspects, as in developing the ecosystem, developing the talent pool, easing the process for so many stakeholders, like being able to talk to them, like the juniors, being able to deal with the CFOs or being able to deal with company management or stuff like that. So it's something that's very important for the whole ecosystem, for my job, for their job. They will not be able to take it from one step to the next if they're stuck in a certain place, and nothing is going to carry them except the people who are managing them, how they take them from one area to the next.
Clearly, you believe in the importance, and that is what I've heard from a lot of the leaders. What programs have you put in place or seen in place across your career that work well to build mentorship for those in different roles?
I'll tell you honestly, I've always been working in very small teams. So there was there was extreme day-to-day interaction between myself and the team on a daily basis. So we've never had the need to develop like company-wide programs, because at HC it was a small team, Forbes was a small team, and Mediterrania Capital is a small team. So having that day-to-day interaction in every single detail was something that's very important. I was actually asked by one of my associates one day when I was in Forbes, and he was like, "Noah, why are you still doing this? You are very young. You're now the head of investment banking of one of the largest investment banks in Egypt. So what's your drive? What's getting you here every day in the morning? And why are you doing this?" For him, it's as if I reached the top of the world, of course. And I told him at the beginning of my career or my path, it was all about learning. It was about absorbing as much as I can. In the middle part of it, it was all about achieving, like taking that knowledge and turning them into a track record. Now it's all about building an ecosystem and a team. So now I don't get the same ecstasy from closing a transaction. But if I have an analyst who was not able to speak in a meeting because they felt intimidated or something, and I see them doing a presentation after working with them for some time, this is something that gives me the most satisfaction. So it has to be built in the DNA of the leader that they understand what the role is. The role at some point has to shift from personal achievement to bigger contribution. And I think that being part of the DNA of a lot of leaders is something that's very important to be part of the culture of any company.
Yeah, again, your passion in the area shines through, and I can tell how passionate you are about helping others grow and develop, and I love that. And I think if we had leaders like that in all industries across the board, then it'd be a much better place. So definitely connect. We touched on confidence of analysts and associates. We've got listeners today who won't be in small teams, but will be in big teams as well. Any advice for them to find a mentor, reach out to a mentor, better align themselves with a mentor that can help them progress in their career?
Reach out, speak, don't get intimidated. At the end of the day, even if someone turns you down, what's the end of the world? Well, it's not the end of the world. What's the worst that's going to happen? If you go to someone and tell them, I want to shadow you for some time. And if they say, no, I don't have the time, what's the worst that could happen? It's just a no. You'll find someone else. So don't be afraid to try and to go after what you want, understanding that the worst that could happen is really nothing at the end of the day.
Great advice. And have you seen a difference since COVID? Because obviously being at home for so long and investment banking relied so much on the team being around each other and learning from each other, the apprenticeship kind of style we talked about. Yes. Have you seen a difference since COVID on that front?
Yes, of course. During COVID, it was not easy at all, because you need to be, as I'm telling you need to be like interacting with each other 24/7. But at the same time, you're distant, and it's a very stressful job. So for me, the office was a fun place. We used to laugh and we used to do silly things. So we used to eat together. So that kind of like eased the stress away from the day-to-day things that you're doing. So when you were doing it alone at home, it was just the stress part of it. It was not the fun part of it. So of course it was stressful. However, I'm very happy that eventually, and honestly in Egypt, the restrictions were not huge. As in, we didn't have like total lockdowns for months and months. No, we were back in the office after a few months. So it was something that helped us a lot to get back in rhythm very quickly.
Excellent. Okay, thanks. Networking. Let's touch a bit on networking. Again, key area I've heard for investment banking and for those that want to reach the higher echelons and become MDs, etc. Talk to me a bit about how you network.
I think I deserve a trophy in meeting new people. I think I'm the easiest person to meet someone new, talk to them, and make friends with them in an instant.
Love it. Good quality. Good quality.
Yes. I think, of course, having a very strong network is something I think no connection is not worth having. Whenever someone from my team would come and tell me, okay, there was this company that wanted to meet with us, they wanted the process to sell the company, however, maybe it's too small, maybe, and I would tell them, let's go, let's talk to people, let's understand more. Maybe it's not the right time for the company to do something now, but maybe it will be the right time in 2-3 years. And who will be next to them, guiding them through the process? So networking is something that's very important, also with the idea that you want to help others. It's not just that I want to maintain a connection. I want to develop a connection. I want to develop a relationship. So if someone is asking you for what to do in something in their operations, sit with them and tell them what you've seen, and share your experience, because this is how you build trust. This is how, because at the end of the day, whether on the private equity side where you are getting into someone as a partner, or on the investment banking side where you are going to someone as an advisor, those two relationships can never work without trust. So building trust in your relations it's not just about the number of people that you know. It's about the quality of the relationships that you have, and having the integrity and the ethics and the contribution, and you don't be selfish with your information. If you have a piece of information, share it, because this is how ecosystems develop, especially in emerging markets. In emerging markets, it's not just about doing one transaction, it's about evolving as a whole into better economies, more developed ecosystems, having better tools in the market. So it will not come from individual efforts, it has to come from collective efforts. So I think focus not just on the number of your network, but also on the quality of the relationships, and what are you bringing to the table in that relationship.
I love that. It really resonates with me, and it's how I tackle relationships that I'm building. Again, you talk about talk to everyone. Anyone could be a potential great relationship. Helping others develop, by helping others, do you develop meaningful relationships and build that trust and share. Don't hoard that information or knowledge for yourself. Any other tips on how to go about networking? Is it events? Is it LinkedIn? Is it opportunities that come in? Talk a little bit through that.
I like personal interaction, so it's for me it's events. I like to go to networking events, conferences. And don't say no to, maybe an event is not very relevant to what I do, but just go. You at least you'll have one or two interesting conversations. So again, what's the worst that could happen? You will go meet a couple of people that you have interesting conversations with and leave. But there's nothing. But for me, it's purely personal, interpersonal, one-on-one, face to face. So I love networking events.
Perfect. And to build a meaningful relationship, you touched on trust and you touched on knowledge, but after you've met those people at events, what tactics do you use to build a long-term relationship? Are there certain things you do each time?
No, but if you, let's say, for example, you talk to someone who is managing a company, and he was telling you that he was looking for someone to head their HR department, for example. And keep a mental note of that, so that if you come across someone who's into human resources, who's like looking for a job or something, make that connection. So keep mental notes of what people need, and then make sure that whenever an opportunity comes, so that you can help them with that. This is what builds good relationships. So don't just have the conversation on a shallow basis. Have a real conversation with people, so that you can get real takeaways from it, so that you can contribute to what they need.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing those tips. And again, I'm sure they will resonate with the listeners today. Growing and developing as a leader. We've touched on mentors. We've touched on experience, being in it, getting it done is one of the best ways to learn. What else has helped you grow and develop into the leader you are today?
Tough times. I told you my path has been always tough times. Uh, no, I think honestly, I've been very, very lucky with the teams that I've been working with, whether my managers, analysts and associates that I used to work with. I think that was the biggest contributors to developing the person that I am today. because I enjoyed work with all of them. We all shared the same values, we all shared the same mindsets, we were aligned on what we wanted to do. So I've always felt like I was a part of a team. I was not just working alone, and that helped me a lot to understand the value of teams as well and their contributions of everything. So I would say one of the best things that happened to me was the teams that I worked with. And all the stakeholders, honestly. So even the clients that I worked with, even the lawyers that I worked with, even the big four companies that I worked with, everyone that I worked with, like at large as stakeholders, they all contributed a lot to the person that I am.
Amazing. That's great. And I think it leads nicely onto the culture area. So you've obviously been in the industry a long time. You've experienced a lot of changes over the years. How do you feel IB culture has changed over your career?
I think I like the newer generations when they came into the industry. They kind of like made it. They have this brotherhood sense. It's something that I loved, especially when I was working in Foros, because I was building the team basically. So a lot of the people who I worked with, I was the one who hired. For me, it was about building, because at the end of the day, you will not find one person that has 100% of the skill set that this job needs. No matter how senior they are, of course, it builds across the years, but especially on the analyst, associate, VP level, you will not find someone who has 100% of the skill set. So building a team that is complementary in their skill sets, like someone is very technically strong, someone is very emotionally intelligent, someone is like a dynamo, like energizing everyone around them, and create the culture that would allow this know-how to diffuse across the team rather than each one depending on his own skill set alone. Like, no, it's about building this skill set across the team and building a culture and an environment that just makes everyone wants to help and contribute to the person sitting next to them.
Awesome. I love that. Really building on each other's skills and building a team where everyone complements each other. So being involved in the hiring process like you have at Pharos, building up a large team, what are you looking for? What's the ingredients when those analysts, associates come to meet you that you're really looking for?
Number one, willingness to learn, an ability to learn fast, because it's a job that needs you to learn very fast. Number two, integrity and ethics, because if you don't have that, you will never have the trust to be a good advisor, or either within the team or outside of the team. Number three, I would say very strong teamwork skills. You need to understand that it's not a selfish job. It's a job that has to be done across many people. Number four, it's not a 9 to 5 job. So this job is already hard enough. It has to develop into like your hobby or something, to be able to enjoy it, to be able to get creative, to be able to like stare at numbers and see a story. Like, numbers are not just numbers. Numbers are a story with depth and history and forward-looking outlook and stuff like that. So you need to enjoy it to be able to do that. Otherwise, you will have like mental blocks. So it's not just a technical job. I think these are things that are very, very important for me. Other than that, like technical skills and stuff like that, they're very easy to learn. Honestly, it's not rocket science at the end of the day. I used to tell people that I work with, at the end of the day, we're dealing with basic math, addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. So it's not rocket science. It's the logic that goes behind it that makes it, at the end of the day, sophisticated. So you have to have the ability to develop logic. The underlying tools are easy.
Yeah. In another episode, one of the leaders shared with me, and it really resonated with me as well. He said, it's about making the story easy for the
Of
clients.
course.
Can have all these numbers and we can be the experts, but actually what they want is it to be simple.
Of course.
Them. And that's the key. If you can make it simple, then you're a long way of the way there. So that really resonated with me. And so I've got willingness to learn for those listening, integrity, ethics, strong teamwork, and being passionate because it's a hard job. And I want to go into that demanding area of investment banking, right? It is a demanding industry. There's no two ways about that. And you've got to be prepared. And I think most who go through their internships and get involved know what they're getting themselves in for. But how do you manage culture effectively whilst considering the demands of your clients and the business?
It takes a very smart leader to make that balance. You have to understand that it's not just about the client. Your team is equally as important as the client. And sometimes you just need to go in, tell your team, go home early today. Take a weekend, don't work. First thing next week, we're going to come here fully energized and start like working on things. So it has to be a balance between both. Of course, you cannot be, because again, client expectations are extremely unrealistic. So it's something that's very important. However, you need to make that balance, and you need to be very aware of that balance, because sometimes you can get sucked away in the day-to-day demands of clients and you forget that it's getting at the expense of your team. And that's not something that should be the case at all.
So you really felt it needs to be dealt with at leadership level, and it's on the leader of the team to work with the client to make it reasonable for their team.
Definitely, because you're asking your analysts and associates to be always there. You're asking them to have the energy and to want to learn and to absorb as much as they can. And that's something that's very important. However, you need to have the responsibility to regulate that.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And I want to talk a bit about culture. We have guests, leaders from all over the globe on this podcast. And we've had one leader working for JP Morgan who focused on Africa, but obviously you're there with a big focus on the Middle East and Africa as well. What do you think is different about investment banking culture between, the Middle East and Africa compared to maybe the Europe or US?
I think I've worked with investment banks across different countries as well. And I've always felt that there are not a lot of differences. Maybe the sizes of the teams are different, and that's something that maybe adds layers of variances between how things happen. However, other than that, I think the issues are the same. And you've been saying it since we started talking. Most of the people are saying exactly the same things, and they are seeing things in the same way. And it's a job that we might think that it's very different in different parts of the globe. However, the core of it's very similar.
Excellent. So longevity in the business, we've talked about the good parts of the culture. Which part of investment banking culture would you most like to see change?
That's a very difficult question. I would want to see change. I think we can get carried away with how things are demanding on the outside. That the same point that we were talking about, that we sometimes forget that the team's well-being and their ability to have a good balance in life and stuff like that sometimes comes as a second priority, and it should not be the case.
For sure. And I like that. And again, as you said, it's the leader's responsibility. So to hear you speak like that, and I have heard others speak like that as well, is really positive for the future of investment banking. It's come up when I've asked that question with others that more could be done to build the amount of women in the investment banking industry and also help women enter more of the leadership positions. As an inspirational leader in the space, I'm really keen to get your thoughts. So what do you feel could be done to help increase the number of women in investment banking?
I think, first of all, fair chance when there is a vacancy or employment position, and that merit should be the only metric of selection. I think also there's a lot of, and I think that's happening. There's a lot of flexibility on the work environment that needs to be done in all cases for men and women. Maybe women could benefit from it a bit more since sometimes they have different roles. However, that is already starting to happen. I think COVID helped a lot when it comes to this. I think giving them the fair chance to say and decide, no, I can do it. Don't decide on a woman's behalf whether she's too busy or that she can do it or cannot do it. If she wants to manage her time, she will manage her time. So don't put yourself in a position where you might judge what she can or cannot do. Honestly, I was blessed because I worked with a lot of women in my life. Unfortunately, I haven't seen the same ratio evolving into the leadership roles. And there has been usually a filtration that happens where men are able to advance further than women. However, I think it's getting there. It's also an effort, as I was saying, when it comes to the culture and the whole idea of putting the team first. It's a leadership responsibility. I think also it's a leadership responsibility to make sure that there's proper diversity in the team. It's also a woman's responsibility to speak and to make sure that they are not assumed to be able to do certain things or not be able to do certain things. I've never dealt from a point of weakness, and probably this is why I've reached where I've reached. I don't really like the word women empowerment, because it implies as if they have been de-empowered and you want to re-empower them. I think we're powerful. Just deal with two people as human beings and don't emphasize the difference, whether by making special rules for the advantage of one, or making judgments to the disadvantage of women. It's just about deal with them as equals, and if they perform, it's just about performance. And that's a mindset that a lot of women should have to do as well.
That's great insight there, and I hope the flexibility continues, and judging more on fairness and merit and open dialogue that you mentioned, and hopefully there's some advice for female listeners today from you, an inspirational leader that will help them as well continue to progress in their careers. So thanks for sharing that, Noha. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think also maybe one piece of advice for our female listeners is that embrace your difference. When you walk into a meeting room with 15 men, don't get intimidated. There is a reason why you are there. There's something that you have to contribute, there's something that you have to add, and you are there for your abilities, and you have to trust those abilities. Don't get intimidated. It's something that a lot of women suffer from, is that when they go into a meeting room with all these men, they assume that they are the outsiders. You're not an outsider. You are there for something that is equal to everyone else who's into that room.
Thanks, Noha. Really powerful stuff, and embrace your difference. I think that's a great thing for everyone to take away, right? So thanks for that.
Of course.
Career. I mean, I guess you don't often look back on your whole career. That's what I hear in these podcast episodes. So if you could go back to your first day at HC, Noha the analyst, knowing what you know now, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
What piece of advice would I give myself? Enjoy it. Just enjoy it. It's a very fun ride. You're up to something that is very exciting. There's going to be a lot of down moments because you're going to get extremely stressed, overworked, stuff like that. However, they will pass. And at the end of the day, you will look back at just the fun part of doing the job that you were doing. So just enjoy the ride. It's getting very exciting.
Nice. I love that. Enjoy the ride. That's important, right? For everything we're involved in. And what about work-life balance? I've always felt that you gain more experience and insight on work-life balance as you progress your career. And I always would give myself different advice if I could go back. So talk to me a bit about work-life balance, how you go about that, and how those in the demands of the industry now could do better in that area.
I think understanding that the work-life balance is not just a day-to-day thing. It's sometimes you're going to be overworked and sometimes you're going to relax a little bit. So understanding that it comes in cycles is something that's very important. Don't stress about it. If the cycle of overwork is there, another one is going to come where you are more relaxed, and vice versa. That's something that's very important. Try to integrate your work in your day-to-day life as much as possible. So, I mean, you will have a lot of friends that maybe are in the same industry. Just go out together. Maybe a work conversation will pop up for like 15 minutes, but the rest of it, you're just friends. Don't stress about things. Again, if you do it for the fun of it, you will. If you are staying in the office late, don't just be stressed behind your laptop and all tensed up. Get up, have a good conversation with a colleague, have a laugh, go for a bite, come back, finish your work. Integrate it as part of, have fun while doing it, so that you don't need to get out of it to have fun, so that you don't need to get out of it to like take a vacation or whatever. So that's one part. But on the other side as well, make sure that you take adequate breaks. Throughout my career, sometimes I had to say no. I will press a button. I am traveling for a week. I'm not available for that week. I would make sure that I prepare everything before I disappear for a week, but then I would disappear for a week and I would come back. Because if you prepare for it well, you'll be able to do it, but you have to put it as part of your priorities. These breaks are very important to have periodically, basically.
Excellent. And you talked a bit about your unexpected facts at the start. What do you do outside of work to help you relax and recharge?
I have 3 dogs, so they keep me very busy.
Okay, cool.
No, but it's for us, it's religious. Like the morning walk, the night walk, it's something that's very important for me to start my day and end my day. I meditate sometimes. I aspire to paint, but I'm not sure that I'm any good at it. But I will keep at myself until I get there.
Good.
I study a lot of things that are very far away from what we do on a day-to-day life. So as I told you, I'm a certified neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. I've studied something called Enneagram. I've done hypnosis. So it's like balancing, because at the end of the day, if your life is too boring, like in one part, it's not diverse enough. I get bored, honestly. I need to have a lot of diversity in my life. So that's why I decided to go to things that are on the complete end of the spectrum from what investment banking and private equity and all of this is. So I like to do a lot of things. I don't work out as much as I want, but I always have it in my New Year's resolutions. And I love to travel. I love to go by the sea. So Egypt is an excellent place to be here, because you have like basically 12 months of a 2 hour away from Cairo, some sort of a resort on the beach. So I love the sea. I love being close to the water. So I do that a lot.
I'm very jealous of that, being stuck in London. So I'll definitely reach out to you some tips when I'm traveling to Egypt for sure.
Of course, of course.
I can't believe it, but we're reaching the end of the show. We're moving to only a few minutes left. So I wanted to start to wrap. For those listening who want to get more of you, Noha, how do they best connect?
On LinkedIn, just send me a message saying that you listen to the podcast, and I'll connect with you.
Excellent. So I'll make sure that we share your profile in the show notes as well. I'm a strong believer that successful leaders are readers. Doesn't need to be books these days, because podcasts, other materials, there's so much out there. But is there anything you recommend to those aspiring to be leaders, something that had an impact on you?
I would say read across genres. Don't focus on something. It's about diversity, you know? This job is about diversity, because you're going to meet someone who's very detail oriented, and you're going to meet someone who's a dreamy, creative guy. So you need to speak both languages. So don't get super fixated on one thing. So the last book that I was reading was a book called, it's a very old book, but I just got to reading it now. It's called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, I know it well.
So I liked it a lot.
It's a great book.
Yeah, but now I'm reading a book about dog psychology. And before that book, I was reading a novel in Arabic. And before that book, I was reading a psychology book. So it's that diversity, you know. It's like read across everything, anything that you get your hands on. Listen to everything. I listen to a lot of podcasts across the board. I watch a lot of documentaries. I like the idea of knowledge, irrespective of how relevant the knowledge is or not relevant, but it just deepens and makes you as a person much richer, and that makes you a person that can bring a lot to the table, and that makes you a good contributor to work, to stakeholders, to society at large, basically.
Yeah, great feedback, and lots in there, and we'll put maybe a couple of those titles in there into the show notes as well. Tipping Point for sure, and if anyone's interested in dog psychology, we'll get that one in there as well. Before I move to the thank you, any final words for the audience today?
Again, I would tell you exactly what I would have told myself, I don't know how many years ago. Enjoy the ride. It's going to be very exciting. Make a lot of friends on the way. Turn into a person who's not doing it for just the benefit of themselves, but do it for the right cause as well. Help others. This will make you a very successful person.
Amazing. Great advice. Look, what a great way to end the episode as well. So, hey, I've had a ton of fun. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, Noha. So thanks so much. I know how busy your schedule is. So again, thanks for being here with us today. I'm going to listen back. I'm excited to listen to many of the insights that you shared for the listeners. And I've taken away a lot from today's session, and I'm sure they have as well. So thank you so much for being here, and best of luck for those transactions in the coming quarters.
Thank you so much, Peter. It was really a very nice conversation. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me today for the Investment Banking Leaders podcast. Today's episode was brought to you by Outram, the global leaders in commemorating your most important transactions with a meaningful deal toy. So if you have a successful deal to celebrate, hit me up or the Outram team at outram.com to get your design started. I had a great chat with Noha. She really brought the energy and shared a ton of great insight to help you develop in the investment banking industry. Noha shared insight for those looking to move into the PE space. She shared that the big difference was that investment banking finishes when a deal is done, whereas in PE, it's just the beginning. She said you can start to prepare yourself to make the switch easier by really putting yourselves in the shoes of the buyers, speaking to them about their concerns and really understanding the long-term goals after the transaction's completed. She said studying wasn't key, but being curious and building a deeper knowledge when working in the IB space was. She shared that leadership could support more female leaders by ensuring there is a fair chance for all available roles based on merit, but also by providing a more flexible environment and not judging what a woman can or can't do, but instead asking and letting her make the decision. She said that aspiring female leaders should not feel intimidated, but remember that they have a unique viewpoint that adds value and should speak up and contribute whenever possible. As always, I'm sure you have many of your own takeaways, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. Join me again for the next discussion with another successful investment banking leader. You can find us where all great podcasts live, follow our podcast page, share with those interested, and until next time, best of luck with your transactions.